Hello everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo, where I'm gonna have to ask you, why did early man believe that the sun revolved around the earth? I am doing another bookshelf packing video. I got two more bookshelves left, and I'm just gonna zip through this, or try to zip through this. We know how that goes, because I really need to be packing everything up, and this will be published. It will go live after I've moved, and so I'll be I will be unpacking things and trying to set things up. So getting these videos done and scheduled in advance. So yeah, I've got a couple more shelves here that has a mixture of fiction and but mostly nonfiction, including my natural history books and my books of philosophy and some oversized books. So we'll get started here, and this first group of books are natural history books. Been dusty for a while. This is The Song of the Dodo by David Quammen. So if you're fascinated by the history of Charles Darwin and the whole process, it also makes a little bit of a mention of some of his detractors, but also some parallel researchers that was going on. In particular, let's see, and I can never remember, Watson, was that his name? Well, I do have a book about him, so I'll get to him. But anyway, yeah, this is it. It covers a lot of things throughout the world with the application. It's been a while since I've read this, but it's a really, really excellent book on evolution and Darwin's theory, which people seem to think that if something is a theory, then it's disproven or has not yet been proven, which is not how theories operate at all. Moving on. Adventures with Ed, A Portrait of Abby. So by Jack Leffler. Edward Abbey is the subject. An anarchist, an environmentalist anarchist, who also wrote some fiction, and fascinating book. Talks about a lot of areas where Abby lived and worked, that I have lived and worked in the same places. So a really good biography of Abby. So if that's a character that interests you, I highly recommend the book. Then The Company of Wolves by Peter Steinhardt. Another really excellent book, and a very handsome edition, with some nice illustrations at the beginning of each chapter. It is a fascinating read about wolves and their reintroduction. Many years ago, I used to have a dog-wolf hybrid, so I could relate to many of the things that are being described in here. So yeah, I recommend this book, The Company of Wolves. This was published in 1995. I should mention that, sorry I didn't before I get too deep. The Adventures with Ed book, the biography of Edward Abbey, was a 2002 publication, so that was published, copyrighted 2002. Song of the Dodo is from, let's see, 1996, Scribner and Sons. Okay. Then the next one is another one about wolves. The Wolves of Mount McKinley. So what this is the longitudinal study and notes of some folks who went up into Denali, Mount McKinley National Park to study wolves. This goes back to between 1939 and 1941 when Adolph Murray did a field study about the relationship between the wolves and Dall sheep. So yes, if this is, again, really fascinating read about wolf behavior, and certainly wolves are a controversial topic these days with efforts to reintroduce them into the continental United States, particularly in the Midwest Great Lakes region. Then we have, yes, Dusty, grizzly country. So Andy Russell, a many-sided view of the grizzly bear and the world in which he lives by a noted guide, hunter, naturalist, and photographer. Again, really excellent book. I had lived for a time in West Yellowstone, Montana, so a lot of these books I acquired at that time and was reading up particularly about bears and grizzly bears. This is the 1988 copyright for this book, in case you want to look it up. Then we have, this is the one, yes, Wallace, is not Watson, Wallace. This is The Life of Alfred Russel Wallace, the Heretic in Darwin's Court by Ross A. Slaughton. So concurrently with what Darwin was doing, Alfred Wallace was doing the same, quite independently of what Darwin was doing, although they did eventually share letters about their findings. And it's really quite possible that Wallace had developed the theory of evolution before Darwin did, and Darwin, recognizing that he might get beat, ended up publishing first. But Wallace is famous for the Wallace line, which is this imaginary line in the Eastern Pacific, Western Indian Ocean, where on one side of the line you have parrots and monkeys, and on the other side of the line you have marsupials. It's like a dividing line between different species of animals that never crossed and never commingled. Wonderful book, and this is from 2004. This is 2004, Columbia University Press. So The Heretic in Darwin's Court. Wonderful, immensely readable book if you are interested in natural history and ecology, etc. Then this one here by Simon Winchester. It's a autographed copy. Krakatoa, the day the world exploded, August 27th, 1883. So this is a Simon Winchester book discussing, it's a signed one. I got an autographed copy of the book. This was published in 2003. Fascinating read about Krakatoa and its impact on the environment, both locally and globally. It was a book that I was very interested in, having traveled to Indonesia, in particular the island of Bali. Oh boy, this one I read a long time ago, and I still have it. Yeah, it's a little dusty. Yeah, this is a classic in psychology. Julian Jaynes is the author. The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. I really need to read it again. I read it when I was in my college years. I might have even read it while I was still in high school, but I think it was in my college years. Yeah, because it was published in 1976. So I graduated high school in 1976. So I probably picked this up when I was first entering college. And it's a fascinating read. The premise of the book is that consciousness is something that evolved in humans and to a large degree is connected with the development of the corpus callosum inside the brain, which is this network of neurons that connect the two hemispheres of the brain, which in earlier man was either non-existent or the connections were much weaker. So the two hemispheres of the brain communicated separately and may account for the reason we see in ancient literature so-called eyewitness accounts of miracles like burning bushes that have voices, or that we see gods roaming the earth like minotaurs, etc. So a fascinating read, but I remember very dense read. It was a challenging read, but that could have been just because I was like only 18 or 19 years old. So there's that one. And some of these books are starting to fall over. This was one I read recently, within the last year. Blue Frontier, Dispatches from America's Ocean Wilderness by David Helvarg. And it's probably a bit dated because I read this within the last year, but this book was originally printed in 2006, and this is, 2001, and this is a second edition from 2006. But it has a lot of really important background and talks about how to view the oceans, and particularly the coastlines, as unique ecosystems that are definitely worth preserving and protecting, for not just their aesthetic quality, but also for commercial reasons. Because we love to eat fish. And if we want to continue to eat fish, we need to have better guidelines for fisheries and fishermen, in terms of limits and takes and things like that. And but there's also talks a lot about things like the oil industry and other impacts on the oceans, but particularly that area around the coastlines, because that is the most ecologically diverse part of the ocean, where the most life exists. So a really good read and a good introduction into oceanography, and in terms of an environmental perspective, before you might want to move on to something else. This one, Frozen in Time, The Fate of the Franklin Expedition by Owen Beatty and John Geiger. Okay, this is it's kind of a forensic examination of the Franklin expedition into the Northwest Passage, so the Arctic Ocean in the Northwest Passage around Canada. This was a expedition that failed. Everybody in the expedition perished. And so it was trying to solve the mystery about how they perished, and it's got new evidence that supports the notion that, some cannibalism took place, but the reason they became disoriented was because of the food, the tinned food that they took along with them was contaminated with lead, and that led to lead poisoning. and led to the general delirium of the crew members. Really, really interesting read, and also, provides kind of a background as to how we discovered that lead was so deadly and damaging to human tissue and to human intellect. Okay, and did I mention when this was? I did not mention when this was published, and this was published in originally 1987, but because this contains new information, new forensic information, this is the 2017 edition. Okay, then we have Other Minds, The Octopus, the Sea, and the Deep Origins of Consciousness by Peter Godfrey Smith. Really, really interesting book. It just provides just wonderful descriptions of octopuses as being thinking and motivated animals. And also a lot of really well written descriptions of their biology, and their neural network. It's like each arm of their legs has their own brain. It's just really amazing. This was printed in 2016. Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, the publishers. So yeah, strongly recommend this. If you're into natural history, ecology, environmentalism, books about wildlife and biology, these are all really, really strongly recommended reads. Other Minds, The Octopus, the Sea, and the Deep Origins of Consciousness. Okay. The Moon by Whale Light and Other Adventures Among Bats, Penguins, Crocodilians, and Whales by Diane Ackerman. This book was a gift from a sister, and I believe I read it once a long time ago. This was printed in copyright 1991. This is a first edition paperback from 1992. And I think I read it, but I'm going to have to read it again because I don't remember. I don't remember much about it. And it is a subject that I would be interested in reading and learning more about. 2 books by Stephen Hawking. Blow the dust off. One of which I've read, and that is A Brief History of Time from the Big Bang to Black Holes. I did read this, and it's a very interesting, and he did, it's from 1988. So obviously there's a lot of new science that answers some of the questions that Hawking put in the book that were unanswered at the time and what the speculation was. So it's, but it's a good read in terms of how Hawking thinks or thought. He's dead now. And a bit about his life background and also what was going on in the world of physics at the time of his life. The other one I have is The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking and Leonard Mlodinow. And this one I have not read. And it is got a really high quality paper stock, and there's some color illustrations in here. And let's see here. This is a Bantam Book edition that was published in 2010. So it is a much more modern book with much more, probably more modern information in terms of quantum physics and things like that. So it's on my to-read list. Moving along quickly in the astrophysics and cosmology realm, this one is called Exoplanets by Michael Summers and James Truffle. So it provides a very, very interesting and easy to read explanation of exoplanets and the search for exoplanets. I picked this up because I had briefly dated a PhD student at the University of Chicago who was studying exoplanets as he was working toward his PhD. And so, yeah, I was interested in it. It is a wonderful book. I'm glad I read this. So, and it's a fairly recent book. In fact, I first learned about it in an edition of Scientific American, and it's a 2017 book, first edition. Lovely, very interesting about the search for exoplanets. So you learn all the basics about it. So when there is news breaking about it, then it'll help you understand that. Then we have this one, The Last Winter, which is a fascinating read about climate change and the effects on climate change and the environment. There is a lot of very easily digestible science and information from points where this guy traveled all over the world. This is from a book from 2021, so it's very recent. The one weakness to the book is it does not really provide any direction of where we should go or what we should do, but it certainly does an excellent job of accounting the current situation and what is driving it. Okay. This is a book of poetry. Listen to the Warm by Rod McEwen. This is, I can't remember when I picked this up. This was originally published in 1967. This is a 5th printing. There is one particular poem that I thought I had bookmarked in here that I just really love. And it was an inexpensive book that I found in a bookstore, and a collection of poetry, so it wasn't that big. And I thought I would pick it up because I'm the kind of person who really likes poetry, but I am quite intimidated by it at times. Okay, then we have a couple copies here of Walden by Henry David Thoreau, Walden or Life in the Woods. And then I have this edition, hardcover edition in a book sleeve. That's and really excellent. Really, I mean, if I opened this wider, I bet you we could hear the spine crack. That it just probably hasn't been opened up that much. It's a 1981 printing. This has wood engravings by Thomas W. Mason. Okay, so really, really nice, handsome edition in a slipcase. And that's on my to-read list. I have not read, believe it or not, I have not read Walden before. Then we have Leaves of Grass. This is the Penguin Classics edition by Walt Whitman, which I started to read the introductions. I have not yet read the actual poem because, as I said, sometimes I'm a bit intimidated by poetry, but I know I really, really need to read this. Then I have another little copy, a Signet Classic of Henry David Thoreau's Walden and Civil Disobedience. So I'm not familiar with his essays about civil disobedience. So I'll be reading that eventually. This one I have read. This is Drumbeats, Walt Whitman's Civil War Boy Lovers. So So not to make, not to leave you with the wrong impression, it wasn't that it wasn't that he had uh, a string of, you know, underage, little boys, that he was a pedophile or something like that. And this is a first edition from 1989, although it doesn't have a dust jacket. But when Walt Whitman was working in the hospitals during the Civil War, he befriended and became very, very close to the wounded soldiers that he tended. And they developed very strong bonds, and in many cases, uh, developed a very strong love for one another that is not adequately described by a sense of platonic love. And it includes the letters that they wrote each other in here. And so it's a really, really interesting and fascinating read. Now I'm getting to the philosophy books. And quickly, we've got David Hume, An Enquiry Concerning the Principles of Morals. I have read it, and I don't remember a lot about it, other than it was quite dense. I do have lots of pages marked that I'll want to go back and look at again. Then I have Fascism, What It Is and How to Fight It by Leon Trotsky. So it was his writings about fascism, which I wanted to read about. Leon Trotsky eventually becoming a persona non grata among the Leninists and the Red Russians. I think he wasn't a white Russian, but they had a falling out, and Trotsky was eventually assassinated after he had fled to Mexico. Now this one, Ludwig Wittgenstein, The Blue and Brown Books. These are the preliminary studies for the philosophical investigations. And I got this copy of Wittgenstein because I had watched the film Wittgenstein by Derek Jarman, and I thought it was wonderful. I thought Wittgenstein was such an amazing and interesting person, and his philosophy was really interesting. My opening quote comes from a part of that movie where he was asking one of his students, why did early man believe the sun revolved around the earth? And the student responded with, well, because that's how it looked. So then Wittgenstein says, okay, then, how would it look if the earth was rotating rather than the sun going around the earth? And then the student was about to provide an answer and then stopped and was like, oh. So that moment in the film, I don't know, just made me a fan of Wittgenstein. So then I got this, and it's a difficult, challenging read. But I kind of get what he's saying. This is focused so much more on language and how language is. Well, I had this theory going back when I used to work with emotionally disturbed and learning disabled children. And I had, and there's a lot of psychology, you work with psychologists and psychiatrists with these kids. But I had reached my own conclusion that a person's personality is a function of the language that they use. We talk about certain ethnic groups of having certain qualities about them, right? These stereotypes. But then if you study their language, you begin to see, and this is what he's talking about, the language to me, I felt like he was confirming what I had thought, that language in different areas of the world is going to develop different personalities in people because of the words that they use for different objects. you know, a rose is still a rose, whether it be called by any other name. It's the naming of an object, the naming of something that is a representation or reflection or a revelation of the namer's perspective, and also is a reflection of their history, their personal history, and their cultural history. But this is a deeply challenging read. It doesn't look very long, but man, this is hard. This was one of the most difficult books I've ever read, and I'm not even sure if I got everything in it. Okay, then we've got the Penguin Classic paperback Suetonius, the 12 Caesars, history of the 12 Caesars. Read that many years ago. Then we have this modern library edition, The Philosophy of Nietzsche, which took me a while to read because it has all of the major books in here. So I would read one and then I'd go read something else or whatever. My conclusion is, yeah, Nietzsche was batshit crazy, but he had some really interesting insights into humanity and human behavior, which much of what he was writing got distorted by his sister, who basically re-edited his work in a manner to help the Nazis, so it isn't, people think that the Nazis liked Nietzsche, so Nietzsche must have been, bad, but that was his sister's doing with all that. But anyway, I still have the conclusion that he was batshit crazy because, after all, he had a syphilitic mind, having died of the complications of syphilis, having let it be untreated for so many years. This is a philosopher that I really like their interpretation of the world, and that is Spinoza, A Life, the second edition. Spinoza's view of the world and the universe is very much how I think of things. That and the ideas that come from Buddhism. Yes, this was a really interesting read because I knew nothing about Spinoza. I only read this like last year. This is when was this published? The first edition was in 1999, and this is a 2018 second printing. And yes, I want to read more about Spinoza. To me, he got it right. And then we got one by David Hume again, An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. I have not attempted to read this yet. And then we have Kant, The Arguments of the Philosophers series by Ted Hondreich. And this is Kant by Ralph C.S. Walker. So this is supposed to be a good place to start, I guess, before you start getting more deeply involved with Kant. I'll eventually read that. I have not done that. And now I realize just going through that one shelf was 34 minutes. So the bottom shelf, which I really want to get to, I guess I'm going to have to do another video because otherwise this is just going to be too long. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you got some comments about any of those books that I talked about, or any of the recommendations by the same authors, or about the same subjects, I would love to have those in the Down Under. So share that, please. Hit the like button because it really, really helps with distribution of my content. And in fact, it is the simplest and most powerful thing you can do to help any content creator is hit the like button, because of what it does to influence the algorithms in terms of distribution of our video content. But yeah, subscribe if you want to. And even if you're already subscribed, hitting the like button is still really, really important. You can also find content that I make on Instagram, where I go by the handle of NewsDude76. That's NEWZDUDE76. And then I also have a Facebook page called Calvin Wazoo, where that is focused primarily on music videos that I create, as well as other music-related videos that I find, and music-related content in print, online publications, etc. So you can follow me there as well. And as I say, remember to pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.